Hey, Matt Sitter here, CEO of AFN. At AFN, our central belief is that change is where opportunity happens. The best way to find opportunity in change is a network that is diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. One of the things that we like to do within AFN as well to broaden our diversity of perspective is we make a very big effort to have nonprofits as a part of our network as well. And today we're going to be talking to John Verge, who is CEO of Golden Lane Housing, a nonprofit that is based in the UK. They're a national specialist learning disability housing association. So they provide homes to over 2,800 people with learning disabilities and autism through England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. He's got more than 24 years of experience at Golden Lane, but has been in housing pretty much his whole life. He's the chair of the Learning Disability and Autism Housing Network. And we're going to learn about what he does at Golden Lane, as well as how he got to where he is today. John, great to see you. Thanks for making time.
Oh, thanks for the invite, Matt. Great to see you today.
So obviously, there's a lot of complications that go in with running a nonprofit. You've got a lot of different stakeholders that you're looking at, but can you just tell us a little bit more about the vision for Golden Lane to start us out so we can understand really what it is you guys are trying to accomplish?
Yeah, we're very clear on our vision, and it's quite wide ranging. It's around our belief that everyone with a learning disability or autistic people have got the same opportunities to access good quality housing that meets their need as everybody else. So for us, that clearly is about us providing directly housing in accommodation that we own or in some cases lease off of other landlords, but also having that wider impact. Our very much legacy where we were set up by Mencap, which is the biggest UK learning disability charity 26 years ago now, was very much to have as wider impact as possible, both directly and indirectly. And I think that's one of the things that certainly gets me up in the morning, not just in terms of the fantastic work that our team do every day, but actually the wider impact we can do to help as many people as possible across the UK. And frankly, I've spoken to people across the world, Canada, Finland, South Korea, try to get as many people into the best type of accommodation as possible, because 25, 30 years ago the choices were even limited than they are now. People living in poor accommodation in hospitals, and some of the abuse that went on in
Right.
those situations really have driven us and other organisations to improve the lives of people.
That's great because next thing I was going to ask you was what are the alternatives if people didn't have Golden Lane around? What would be going on? You said a little
Well,
bit around that, but thinking about their
yeah.
families and themselves, what would their lives look like instead?
Well, you mentioned I'm the chair of a housing network, which is a coalition of nearly 30 providers across the country, and we did some research about a year and a half ago, and that shows that the majority of people are still living with family members, predominantly older carers, mums and dads who are getting older, and for some people they want to continue to live with parents. That's their choice, but actually 7 out of 10 people want that independence. Significant amount of people are living in care homes. Some sadly are still living in hospital settings. So at the moment, about 24, 25% of people with some form of support needs are living in the type of accommodation that we offer. That's supported housing, where someone has their own tenancy and the right level of support in their own home. But clearly, we want to provide more of that
Right.
accommodation because it's really needed.
So where people live obviously is like it's where you spend a lot of your time, and that would seem to logically make you a central spot for where coordination of all sorts of other services happen. How much
Yeah.
of a role does Golden Lane have to play in, like, if someone's looking for career assistance or just like getting food to the house, things like that. What type of role do you guys have to play in that coordination of services overall?
We certainly provide a coordination, or that kind of we're part of I guess three organizations to support that person live the lives they want in their home. So there's us as the landlord, the specialist landlord, providing the good property, making sure it's maintained, and then linking with the support provider, the care provider who's going in some cases every day. Often they may be providing overnight care and support in the property. And then in the UK, we work with the local authorities who fund and commission that support. And they're a valuable and important part of that individual's opportunity to live in supported housing. So we make sure that the quality is good. So we have arrangements with the support providers to make sure that the quality of the care is good. And if we notice any issues around people's well-being, the quality of the services going into their property, we will raise what is called a safeguarding alert to the local authority. So we very much, are the eyes and ears, both in terms of the housing side, but also important advocate if the quality of the care in the property in their home isn't of a high quality.
Right. Well, Golden Lane has grown over time.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that is a good sign that you're doing more of what's needed. How are you measuring success for Golden Lane, and what are you wanting to have happen over the next couple of years? How would if the next couple of years were really good, what would you say happened?
Yeah, well, we're just in the process of uh, signing off our new 3-year plan. For most organizations, it would be called a corporate plan. Um, we want everything to be accessible in terms of our services and how we communicate with our tenants, all of whom will have a learning disability or some kind of communication support needs. So we call it our plan. Our new plan that we're going to be launching very much sets out the vision in terms of the impact for the organisation. At the moment, we're coming to the end of our current 3-year plan, and that's very much focused on making sure that our tenants are satisfied with the service that they provide. We make sure that we maintain the property. We've got a clear mandate about sustainability. So as a social housing landlord, we've got set targets by government to improve the sustainability of our properties, and that's something actually is positive for our tenants because it reduces their utility bills as well. Absolutely strong finances. We're a non-profit, but we're still a business, and we've got to be commercially strong, and we've got the highest financial viability rating for a social housing provider. So having strong finances is really, really important. Impact, I have to say, housing as more people each year is really important, and the last year we housed more people than we ever have. We housed 280 people in new accommodation, as well as filling some vacancies in existing. So that's really, really important for us because what gets me out of bed in the morning as well is just seeing the impact that we're making and housing as many people as we possibly can, raising finance, working with government departments to bring in grant funding to have the maximum impact. That's really important for us. And then I guess the final one is we call it working together, but that's both working internally together, working with strong teams, building that culture, very much a values-led organization. So that's really important that we're working together positively to have the best service delivery and the best impact, but also that outward external working. So one of my roles, as I said, is the chair of that housing network, which has meant that I've built really strong links, particularly during the pandemic and post-pandemic with government departments, so that we can, influence and change, make sure that if there are any changes in regulation or policy, that they are positive for the sector, they don't have any unintended consequences, and I think that really builds our own brand as well, because we've got limited
Right.
marketing budget. So actually having a really good reputation, I get out there doing, events, chairing, national conferences. It's one way that we can share the work that we're doing. And importantly for me as well, getting our tenants to actually share their story, hearing from parents the positive impact of what
Right.
good quality housing makes, and the voice of the customer is really really important as well.
And so you said 280 people housed last year. That is a net
Last year,
increase. So that's
uh,
like 10 to
yes,
15%.
yeah, that's what we're
Pretty
looking
impressive
at.
over 1 year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we're really pleased about that. It takes a lot of hard work. Housing one person, it's a lot of work. It's someone's lives. And one of the nicest things I like to do is get out and meet particularly new tenants to hear their story, and get that feedback and get that positive response on what we're
Yeah.
doing.
When we're thinking, you've mentioned a ton of the different stakeholders that you've got to deal with on a regular basis. One of the things that you guys have done is you put out an annual report to tenants. Can you tell us about like how you expect that to be consumed by folks? How are you making sure that this is communicating to that stakeholder group the way that you want it to?
Well, in some ways, it's not so much the way we want it; it's the way our tenants want it. And and,
Okay,
and we've
perfect.
been on a real journey, particularly the last 5 years, around our focus on meaningful involvement with our tenants. Our tenants have learning disabilities, but doesn't mean they don't have a voice, and they can have a real impact in terms of feeding into all of our service delivery. And actually, it's important that they have the scrutiny of our service delivery as well. So they're all involved across all the different elements of our work. We've got tenant groups. We've got a direct link in with our board, so our board gets to hear, from our tenants who are representative of the wider tenant population, what they think of our services. We had an away day in November where tenants came together with board members and the exec team to hear what they thought of our services, how they felt we would deliver in our current 3-year plan, and we've also engaged with them recently in our developing our new 3-year plan. In terms of communication and specifically that annual report, we've got some tenant representatives who've supported us over recent years to develop that annual report. What they clearly told us is what we were providing before wasn't meeting their needs, and they wanted it to be
Okay.
accessible. They wanted to be engaged. They wanted to hear things that they were interested in, and frankly, they wanted it to land on the doormat of our tenants, to actually be not just useful but actually fun, and for it to be engaged. So we developed over the last 2 or 3 years, and we've recently published the latest version, a calendar that gets sent out to all of our tenants. And I visit tenants, and normally I see it up in the kitchen wall or somewhere up, and every month they get to learn something about the organization. There's some activities in it as well, so they can engage with it. And we try to make it again as accessible as possible. So one of the things our tenants told us is some of our tenants don't understand the concept of a percentage, for example. So when you're reporting results, as we do and have to do, often we now talk in the sense of 8 out of 10, for example, tenants are happy with our service. Or we tried. It doesn't mean we avoid percentages completely, because we have to do that for some of our reporting. But it's really helped us to understand, and language as well. And we include QR codes within the annual report, which means people can now lift get their phone, and then it links to a video. So it's really trying to make it as accessible. We've shared it with other housing associations, and the feedback we get is actually it's not just sort of accessible and appropriate for people with learning disabilities. Actually, the
Yeah.
information is accessible, and actually a lot of providers should be thinking about when they give information to make it as clear um, and digestible as possible for all their customers, regardless of the communication levels.
That's awesome. No, I think that that makes a big difference. If we can help people expend less energy understanding, what
Absolutely.
you're providing, it just makes it so that they're more capable of being able to make the decisions that they might want, or to be able to talk about what they need to around the service.
Absolutely, and I don't think it matters what business you work in. You need to listen to your customers. How do what do your customers expect from a service? What's important to them? How do they like to be communicated? Because I'm sure there's lots of corporate annual reports that go out that frankly no one reads because they're 120 pages and they're not accessible. We still do a full annual report with all the annual statements in,
Yeah.
clearly. But in terms of our report to tenants, we continue to get good feedback, and I'm sure next year's will evolve even more and improve even more as we get feedback.
Yeah, I just think that, the audience that you serve kind of puts an exclamation point on, like, hey, we got to understand how they're processing information. And that a lot of times I think we all assume that people process information in a similar way than we do. And you're like, nope, it's
No? Yeah,
definitely something we ought to be paying attention to here.
yeah, yes.
Thinking about the stakeholder groups that you work with outside of just the tenants. When we think about a social investment, there's a lot of different choices that governments could be making, that private individuals when they're making donations, things like that. How do you highlight that this is an important social investment that should be made as people are trying to, or as government policy and things like that, they're trying to choose, like, hey, where should we be putting capital around this? How are you helping to make sure that they understand why this is valuable and what the ROI essentially is on it?
Yeah. There's something about evidence. I talked about evidence and research and reports, and so that you can not just give specific case studies, but you can have, as we've done, some national evidence. But actually, when it comes down to it, it's case studies, real life voices of tenants to actually explain what the difference, for example, our accommodations made, or actually stories of where people are still not getting that
Okay.
accommodation. So I think that's something that we've been focusing on. I think engaging with different stakeholders, but there's the government stakeholders and coming together as the peer group that we've did with the housing network. Some of them of obviously our competitors, but when
Right.
I was part of a number of organizations founding this network, I think we felt that we would be stronger together to have one voice. We may not agree necessarily on everything, and that's why we have meetings and have offline conversations. But actually, when we're talking to government, we come together as one. It enables us to feed into consultation on government policy, attend meetings with one voice. So that's been really important for us to have that one voice. In terms of raising funds, social investment, which is something that we've been doing for 20 years now, but certainly in the last decade, we've really pushed our social investment ask, and we've in, raised social impact bonds. They're listed on the London Stock Exchange, so we
Oh,
have
wow.
to
Okay.
we have yeah. I mean we've raised 40 million pounds over the last decade through that, and yeah, we need to go out and talk to investors. We need to show that their money that they invest with us is
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
be secure. So we do, we've done road shows, and I've been around the city of London talking to big investors to show that we are a strong and financially strong organisation. But at the same time, they're really interested in those stories, the impact that their money will make, and that's been
Right.
really invaluable.
Very cool. So as we're thinking about how you arrived here, John, you've been working in this type of field for a long time. How did this end up as your vocation?
Well, after uni in London, I did a geography degree. Part of that degree, I did some community work, and I really felt that social housing was where I wanted to be. I was very lucky, I guess, made my own luck, but I managed to get a job in housing straight out of uni. Then got a role where they sent me to do a postgrad and did all the training. And yeah, I think a lot of people in social housing, certainly in the UK, often say, oh, they fell into housing. They accidentally, fell into it. I didn't accidentally fall into it. It was something that I was really passionate from day one. And when I joined Golden Lane Housing, they were about a year old when I joined, very
Wow.
much a sort of startup organization. Um, did I think I was going to be there 20, nearly 25 years later? Probably not, but certainly the the values and the vision and the mission that I joined back there is the same. We've grown, obviously. We are having greater impact than we've ever had. But yeah, I've been able to when opportunities have arisen during the organisation, we've grown to take those opportunities. But I've worked for those. I did an MBA at Warwick 13 years ago. Um, and that was part of my, I guess, my professional journey to make sure that if the opportunities arose in the organisation, and I was still here, that I felt that I was confident enough to do that. And certainly when I became CEO, I'm in my seventh year now as CEO. I felt that the experience I'd got, not just from doing the job, but actually experience of that business degree and talking to people out in the profit world, not just the non-profit world, really gave me that confidence to lead the organisation. And yeah, it's a business ultimately. We've got clear
Right.
values. We've got a non-profit status, but we've got to run it as a business. It's got to be profitable. We've got to meet all the regulatory standards that the government sets us, and we have annual visits by the regulator to check that we're still doing what we should be doing. So yeah, it's been a great organisation to work for over that time, and ultimately, which is why I started in social housing as a homeless officer, is the difference that you as an individual and a group of people and an organization and ultimately a sector can make on the lives of individuals.
Great. So thinking back 7 years ago, you're newly
Yeah,
minted in the CEO position. Your career in large part was on the development side until then. So thinking about, I know you said you got your MBA, things like that, but
yeah, yeah, yeah,
all of a
yeah.
sudden you're in charge of everything. You've got to broaden your purview. And simultaneously, you've got all this expertise that was built up on the development side, so it's really easy for you to wade in there. How did you open up your purview and protect yourself and perhaps your people from really diving in on the thing that was your expertise to begin with, when ostensibly you probably had someone else handling that when you
Uh, well,
changed
not
positions?
yeah. There was a bit of a gap in terms of getting
Okay.
a new replacement in for me. I did get some interim support from another member of the exec, but I think ultimately it comes back down to recruiting the right person, and
Okay.
I got someone in. They've recently left. They've got an MD role themselves, and we've said our fond goodbyes at Christmas. And I wasn't joking. I said, you did a far better job than I would have done in the role in the last 6 years. And okay, maybe I was slightly joking, but actually, it's really important that you have, in a sense, better people in terms of doing the role than you would be doing to support you. So I was really blessed and we've now promoted our head of development into that director role. Again, that didn't come by chance. We've done some clear succession planning over recent years and make sure that we've got the structures within what is a relatively small organisation. 120 colleagues in the organisation, but we've got the structures in place that now allow where appropriate and where someone is able to show that they've got the skills to be promoted, we've been able to promote that person into that role. So I think it's having the right people, and just accepting that people are going to do it slightly different. And I would hope, and certainly the feedback I got from my director who's recently left, is that I was supportive, but I enabled them to really develop their own team, and that was really great to see. And frankly, when you become CEO, you've got a lot of other stuff to get your head around. So
Right.
um,
Right.
in some ways, it made it slightly easier to step away from the operational stuff, but
Right.
it still gives you that knowledge. It helps you. I mean, I think having knowledge across different parts of the organization how enables you to ask the right questions. I was very mindful. I didn't want to be driven into coming up with the solutions, but asking the right questions if
Okay.
in
Yeah.
those areas.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, just generally on your philosophy, I am strongly aligned with the fact that you want to be the organization that people are recruiting from. That's just a good sign. Like, yeah, you're going to lose people,
That's
but
well, that
you know,
yeah, and I think we have.
alternative isn't so good.
No, and I think it's particularly, post-pandemic when, after there was a maybe a hiatus on people leaving organizations, we did
Yeah.
see that turn in turnover. Some of that, was really regretted because we lost some really good people. But that's because they'd shown that they work for a really good organization, and as we know, in smaller organizations, you don't always have those opportunities, perhaps as you get with larger organizations. But we bring different people in; they bring a different perspective. We've got some great people who joined us in the last 3 or 4 years. We do, in fact, I've got a welcome to Gold Lane Housing Day in London and Manchester in the next couple of weeks, where we're doing induction days for people who've joined us in the last 12 months. So yeah, lots to be positive about when you have turnover, as well as bringing fresh ideas in. Um,
Great. So thinking about you personally, a couple of things that I'm interested in. You know, you always got to be learning in some way. How are you making sure that you're continuing to learn in your job?
well, I guess coming from, I guess some of the post-grad learning is doing your own self-learning, reading, exploring stuff. Uh, Often, I mean, frankly, the internet is great now. I remember when I did my postgrad housing degree in the mid 90s, we didn't have the internet, so everything was in the library. So yeah, so I love to soak up information that way. I love to talk, to engage with people, picking up the phone. One of the reasons I like going to events is that networking, finding the right people with the right information. And having that right level of knowledge. I don't need to know everything, but the information that I do need to know. I'd like to have a good feel for it. Um, and I just like learning stuff. I think the world changes all the time, and it, it's good to be respected, and people to ask you a question, and to keep up to speed with things.
Okay, so year's 365 days long for all of us. There's ebbs and flows to the year. You got to recharge over time. How do you make sure that you are filling back up your tank so that you can work the way that you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the recharging in terms of in work time is actually, frankly, going out and spending some time with
Okay.
tenants and colleagues, just outside your kind of the normal monthly. You've got meetings, you've got one-to-ones, you've got exec meetings, you've got board meetings, you've got committee. Almost just to get out of that cycle. So one of those things is, go and visit some tenants, go and meet some people out, and staff out and about across the country. Spending some time with colleagues in the office. I spent an hour with our team that take the repairs calls last week in our Manchester office. Just sat down, had a chat, met some new colleagues, sat down with a long-standing colleague just to hear from them what some of the pressures and some of the positive things that are happening. So that kind of recharged my battery as well, because it's kind of, as I said, outside the day job. I think that work balance. I mean, I love my work, but it's also important to, you know, to find time just to take some time out. I've got a dog that gives me an excuse when I'm working from home to
Okay.
go out for a half an hour walk at lunchtime. Sometimes that might mean taking a work call. Sometimes it's just listen to a podcast and just getting but frankly, it's just getting some fresh air. I am a big sports fan, so I do, you know, I've been watching the American football over the weekend. I'm a 49ers
Okay.
fan, so not the best weekend from
Half for
that
a year.
point of
Yeah.
view, but yeah, but sports, and you know, I love a movie, I love the cinema, so and spending time with the family and stuff. So it's, yeah, getting that balance and recharging the batteries is really important. But also recognize it's, you know, sometimes you do have to get up early or work slightly late to get the work done, and frankly, I don't mind that, as long as I've got the time out, you know, the weekends and other points of the week that I can read, you know, as you said, recharge those batteries, and also recognizing, and I've learned this from, you know, you know, Sarah in our group that I attend, you know, is recognizing the times of the day where your energy levels might naturally dip, and I've learned so much from that, because I make sure that I kind of try as much as I can to design my diary and when I'm doing pieces of work around that. So that's been, so being part of the network's been, you know, it's been really good to kind of just get that, some of those kind of uh, pieces of advice that helps you in your working week.
Excellent. Well, we're very proud to have you as a part of AFN. I think that we've learned a ton from you over time. I want to be able to open it up for questions if we've got any. So feel free to come on. But John, this has been really informative. Thanks a ton.
No, thank you so much, Matt.
You're muted, Brenda.
I clicked the video, not the mute. Yeah, thank you, John. I really enjoyed everything that you've shared. And I do have a few questions for you because I'm listening to, it was one that really stood out. I'll start with, so you talked about, so you're nonprofit,
Yeah.
but you have investors. Talk to me a little more about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we're a housing association, so it means us, you know, buying and developing property, and you know, certainly in parts of England, that could be very
Yeah.
expensive real estate. So, you know, we've our asset base is probably around 140 million pounds. I don't know, 100, 160, 170 million dollars, that kind of level. You know, and a lot of that obviously is money that we've had to raise. So we have had some government grant funding, but for our part of the sector, there isn't a huge amount there. It doesn't go very far. So most of the money that we've raised over the last 26 years has been through either banks. So we go out and borrow money. In the very early days, we got a soft loan from our founding charity, Mencap. And basically, we almost lose that as a down payment. So they lent us X number of million pounds, and then we went away to the banks and said, "Can you lend us, you know, 80%, and we'll go and buy some properties." And then, you know, you use that value in the properties and equity for so long. But we did get to a point in about 2012, 2013, where that was becoming more difficult. And then it was at that point we looked at different opportunities. And one of the opportunities, which we'd done in 2003 and on a very small scale, was issuing our own housing bonds. So in 2003, we issued just under £2 million of bonds, very much to individual investors. We did, you know, we were literally going out doing lots of what we call road shows, and but when we got to 2013, things had moved on in the kind of, there was much more interest in terms of social investment. So in 2013, with a Dutch bank, we issued our own bonds, and we raised significant. You know, we raised, I think it was around £10 million at that time, but it was a lot of work, resources internally, and we wanted to do something that was repeatable, but wasn't so intensive for the organization itself. So we linked in with a charity that raises funds, social investment, and developed a platform for charities to issue their own bonds. And it was listed on the London Stock Exchange. So in 2014, we had two of our tenants. They were the first people with learning disabilities to open the London Stock Exchange at 8 o'clock. And we were oversubscribed within 3 days. And we've
Very cool.
obviously, we've done that over a number of times. I'd say at the moment, not so much there is an interest in social bonds, but with the way the markets have gone in the last year or so, it's not the right time for us to. We will be going back to the bond market, but we're just waiting for the conditions to be a bit more favourable. So in the last few months, we've raised £10 million from a bank in the UK, and we're just about to sign another facility for our development for the next financial year. So we'll have around £20 million to spend over the next 18 months to 2 years, and that's and that provides for the investors, particularly our social investors, some real tangible outcomes. When we launched our first retail bond in 2014, one of the requirements was to issue a social impact report, very much showing the impact of what their money had done for individuals. So we've been doing that ever since. However, in the last 2 years, we've actually developed a ESG report. So we were the first supported housing provider in the UK to sign up to certain sustainability reporting around ESG, and that gives evidence to all of our investors and banks and stakeholders of the impact that we do.
So very fascinating, and congratulations on the long-standing work.
Thank you.
So I heard you say you have about 120 employees, and the work has got to be gratifying, but it's also got to be a pull on one's heart to deal with, the people that you are supporting to come out of some of the places that they've been in. That shouldn't happen. How do you, how do you choose the personality makeup, of the type of people who can do this type of work, and what's your management style around, building a sustainable workforce that can do all the things that it takes to be successful?
Yeah, well, I think at the starting point is our values, and one of our values is caring, and we've discussed that quite hard, because caring isn't just about caring for the people, right. It's also caring for the business and doing the right for the business and also right for the people, which should be the same, but there is making sure that we get the balance right. Our other values around listening, honesty, being reliable and creative, so when someone applies for a role within Golden Lane Housing, one of the things that we do at interview stage is test they meet our values, and every person who works for Golden Lane Housing is interviewed by a panel of either staff or tenants who have a learning disability, and they ask questions specifically around those 5 values, and they will really get under the skin of that individual. And then at the end of a day of interviews, or sometimes the following day, we'll get the feedback from that group who are supported by our members of our team in that process, and then they will give us feedback in terms of how they came across. Now, we don't solely judge appointing someone on their feedback, but clearly, if there's not a match between how we assess the candidate and what they said, we wouldn't be appointing someone who doesn't at least meet the minimum threshold that they set in terms of meeting our values. So that's that's in terms of when we appoint someone, and then throughout, we have 6 weekly check-ins with our teams and our staff. We reevaluate that people are meeting those values, and we're very much about wellness, kindness, honesty and transparency as an organization, but there's also the accountability. As I said, we are a business, so and a business of 120 people, we don't. In fact, we don't have the capacity to carry for people to be carried. Everybody has to be working at the right capacity and delivering the right services. Obviously, addressing any issues through training and that's obviously important that we do. But yeah, being a non-profit, as I said, doesn't mean that you don't deal with issues head on.
Loved when you said that, because many times people think that a nonprofit is different from other businesses. And I think at least in the US, there's this one form. And the rest of it is the same. It's a business. And so I really admire all of that. This sort of support that you're giving to make sure that people are sticking with the values. I think one of the challenges that I've had, and I wonder if you've experienced that, is when you have a mission-based organization, people interpret the mission in various ways. I've said sometimes it's not a consistent mission. It's, X number of anecdotes of one. And so I'm assuming that the ability to have those check-ins and with people understanding that that's as important as the nuts and bolts of the business that they would do. To stay in front of the team.
Yeah, and that's not just for colleagues, that's also for our board. So every year we revisit our vision and our mission, just to check in that everybody's on the same page. And one of the constant dilemmas we have is because there's huge need in our country for the type of housing we offer. We have to make decisions about who we help, and actually and what we provide in terms of housing and the services, and ultimately that comes down to our not just our overarching business plan and our 3-year plan. We have a clear strategy in terms of our development, so it supports the people on the ground to sometimes make tough decisions about who we can't help. And that's not easy, and we want to help everybody, but if we tried to help everybody, we wouldn't help anybody, because you'd just be firefighting. And even now, we are having constant conversations about how do we respond to the demand, and actually the team continue to get better about dealing with expectations, and also planning with our stakeholders, and telling them, actually, the earlier you come to us and the longer lead-in time, the more likely we are going to be able to help. In our part of the sector, there's too much reactive work and too many reactive requests on support in people into new housing. So anything we can do to be more proactive, the better for us.
I have a lot more questions, but I want to ask this one more. You talked about impacting policy. Can you talk a little more about, what is the demand on your time that is required for you to actually be able to be impactful on policy, and how successful is that, and what is like the lead time and all of that around policy conversation?
And there are different judgments I have to make in terms of the time I spend on this area. I think firstly, in terms of Golden Lane housing, if there are potential changes, whether that's in regulation, policy, or in our sector, our tenants predominantly get welfare. So if any changes to welfare benefits, that could have a massive impact on our organisation. So there's a sense of, I say, self-preservation, but actually, it's not just a nice thing to do. For me, in some areas, it's a must thing to do. And even if there isn't any things happening at the moment, the chances are that there could be. And if the sooner you've got those links, you share any concerns that you have, the better. And having those, for me, it's about building the personal links. For me, there's nothing better than having a senior government official ring me up and just asking me for some advice, or, we're thinking about this. What do you think? That kind of building that relationship is really important. And I get support from my board. They when I give my board CEO updates, I will tell them what I'm doing in this part of my working month in terms of that influence and campaigning. But yeah, it takes some of my time, but the reality is I'd much rather have slightly longer working week hours and do that work than not do it at all. Both important for Golden Lane and ultimately, for the sector, because that, in a sense, it's that bigger picture stuff,
Yes.
I saw recently a new scheme opened by arguably one of our competitors, but they're a very close friend of our organization. And I know that a conversation I had with their CEO probably about three years ago at a conference, when they were asking me about this opportunity and I gave them some advice. It may have just been a very small piece of the reason they did that, but it's really nice to see that other organizations can do work that we're doing, and anything we can do to support that is great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brenda.
Great stuff, John. Thanks a ton. And looking forward to having this available on the YouTube channel. We'll give you an update on that when it's ready. But we're halfway through the week. Hope everything's good, and look forward to seeing you both soon.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks again,
Thanks,
John. Thank you,
Brenda.
Matt, always. Okay, bye.